Now, we begin with a special part of our service to honor armed forces members who have died in the line of duty. To do that, I would like to combine my tributes to our fallen soldiers with words of Torah. So, we're reading this week's Parsha about the first eulogy ever registered in the Torah. We're reading Genesis 23:2. ותמות שרה בקריית ארבע, היא חברון בארץ כנען. ויבוא אברהם לספוד לשרה ולבכותה. And Sarah died in Kriyat Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came lispot lesara, to eulogize Sarah, and to weep and to cry for her. Then the Talmud contains advice for those who wants to deliver a eulogy for the dead. And they say, their aim should be to call attention to the achievements of the deceased. So, we are gathered here today on Shabbat, the holiest day of the week, to remember and honor our fallen soldiers who were killed in the First, Second, and Israeli wars. To remember the sacrifices they have made and currently are making in the name of liberty, equality, and justice. And to honor and eulogize our heroes, remembering their achievements, their courage, and their dedication. We join others across Canada in ceremonies like this one to acknowledge and thank them for their heroism and sacrifices, to let them know that we won't forget and that we have learned the lessons of stepping up to fight evil in every generation. I want to share with you a story about Captain Charles Plum. He was a Navy pilot in Vietnam. He flew 75 successful combat missions, but on number 76, his plane was hit by a missile. Somehow he was able to eject and safely parachute to the ground. But he was captured by enemy forces, and after spending 6 years in a Vietnamese prison, he was released and returned to the United States, where he went on to live, I guess, a normal life. Many years later, Captain Plum was sitting in a restaurant in Kansas City. A man about 2 tables away kept looking at him. He didn't recognize the man. A few minutes into the meal, he stood up and walked over to the captain's table, looked down at him, pointed his finger in his face and said, "You're Captain Plum." He looked up and said, "Yes, sir, I'm Captain Plum." He said, "You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You were on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down. You parachuted into enemy hands and spent 6 years as a prisoner of war." I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He replied, "Because I packed your parachute." Captain Plum was speechless. He grabbed the man's hand, pumped his arm, and said, "I guess it worked." "Yes, sir, indeed it did. Indeed it did," said the captain. "And must tell you, I've said a lot of prayers of thanks for your wonderful skill, but I never thought I have the opportunity to express my gratitude in person." Captain Plum became a successful motivational speaker, and in his lectures, he always encourages people around him to ask themselves, "Do you know who packed your parachute?" Today, we acknowledge those who, so to speak, packed our parachute so we could have an easier life in a free country. We specifically honor the General Monash Legion, number 115 of the Royal Canadian Legion. The General Monash branch was created in Winnipeg in 1934 for Jewish veterans of the Royal Canadian Legion to counter the rise of Nazi ideas and anti-Semitism occurring at the time. It was named after General Sir John Monash, an Australian Jew who rose to command the Australian forces on the Western Front during World War I. In 1918, Monash ably led a mixed force of Australians, Canadians, British, and Americans and achieved great success fighting Germans' resistance. King George V knighted him on the battlefield. During World War II, the branch kept in touch with servicemen and women at home and overseas. Comfort parcels and news from home were sent faithfully. The branch provided invaluable social, mutual aid, and recreational services to its members and the broader community. Over the last few years, Congregation Shaare Tzedek has been honoring the heroes from the General Monash branch during our Remembrance Day services. A tradition that, considering the anti-Jewish sentiments growing once again around the world, should never die, to remind us to stay strong in our commitment to defend our values.